The cards as a sequence. Most interpreters of the major arcana take one of two approaches. Either they consider the cards as separate entities, or they look at them as a sequence. The first approach looks at each card as representing different qualities or situations of importance to a person's spiritual development. The Empress represents the soul glorified in nature, the Emperor, mastery of self, etc. This system considers the numbers on the cards as part of their symbolic language. The number 1 belongs to the magician, not because he comes first, but because the number signifies ideas, unity, willpower, appropriate to the concept of the magician. The second approach looks upon the trumps as a progression. The magician is number 1 because his qualities form the starting point of a growth pattern figured in the other cards. Card number 13, say, belongs at just that point between the Hanged Man and Temperance and no other. Each new trump builds upon the previous one and leads the way to the next. In general, I have followed the second method. While the number symbolism should not be neglected, it is equally important to see where each card fits in the overall pattern. Comparisons with other numbers can also help us to see limitations as well as the virtues of each card. For instance, number 7, the Chariot, is often spoken as of victory. But what kind of victory? Is it the total liberation of the world, or something narrower but still of great value? Looking at the card's position can answer these questions. The interpreters who have taken this approach have usually looked for some place to divide the trumps for easier comprehension. The most common choice is the Wheel of Fortune. As the number 10, it symbolises a completion of one cycle and the beginning of another. Also, if you place the Fool at the beginning, this divides the cards neatly into 2 groups of 11. Most important, the idea of a turning wheel symbolises a change of outlook, from a concern with external things, such as success and romance, to the more inward approach depicted in such cards as Death and the Star. Despite the value of seeing the major arcana as 2 halves, I have found that the trumps divide even more organically into 3 parts. Setting the Fool apart is really a separate category all by itself, and setting it apart allows us to see that it belongs everywhere and anywhere. Gives us 21 cards, 3 groups of 7. The number 7 has a long history and symbolism. The 7 planets of classical astrology, 7 as a combination of 3 and 4, themselves archetypal numbers, 7 pillars of wisdom, the 7 lower stations of the tree of life, 7 openings in the human head, 7 chakras, and of course, 7 days in the week. Most meanings of 7 derive from the fact that before the telescope, people could see 7 planets in the sky. That is, 7 moving objects: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. Though the idea of the 7-day week comes from ancient Israel, which may have got it from Babylon, the European names for the days come from the planets as personified in the Roman and Norse gods. One particular aspect of 7 relates it directly to the tarot. The Greek letter pi stands for the ratio that exists in all circles between the circumference and the diameter. No matter how large or small the circle, the 2 will always work out to the same fraction, 22/7, and the major arcana with the Fool comes to 22. Just as without the Fool, it reduces to 7. Also, 22 times 7 equals 154. 154 adds up to 10, linking it to the wheel, and 154 divided by 2 for the 2 arcana comes to 77, the entire tarot with the Fool again set aside. Like the Kabbalistic conception of God, the point is nothing, yet the entire circle radiates from it, and the Fool's number, 0, has been representing as a point as well as a circle. The best reasons for the division into 3 groups lie within the major arcana itself. First, consider the picture symbolism. Look at the first card in each line. The Magician and Strength are both obviously cards of power, but so is the Devil. The Magician and Strength are linked by the infinity sign above their heads, while the Devil bears a reversed pentacle. If you look at the Devil's posture, one arm up, one arm down, you will see the picture is in some ways a parody of the Magician, with the torch pointing down instead of the wand pointing up. In some decks, card 15 carries the title of Black Magician. In many decks, Justice, not Strength, is number 8. If you look at the posture of the figure in Justice, you will see an even closer resemblance to the Magician and the Devil. The same kind of vertical correspondences apply all the way through the 3 lines. The 3 areas of experience. The division into 3 allows us to see the major arcana as dealing with the 3 distinct areas of experience. Briefly, we can call these consciousness, the outer concerns of life in society, subconscious, or the search inward to find out who we really are, and superconsciousness, the development of a spiritual awareness and a release of archetypal energy. The three levels are not forced categories, they derive from the cards themselves. The first line, with its concentration on such matters as love, social authority, and education, describes the main concerns of society. In many ways, the world we see mirrored in our novels, films, and schools is summed up by the first 7 cards of the major arcana. A person can live and die and be judged a success by everyone around him or her without ever going beyond the level of the Chariot. Many people, in fact, do not reach that level at all. Modern depth psychology concerns itself with the second line of trumps, with their symbols of a hermit-like withdrawal into self-awareness, followed by a symbolic death and rebirth. The Angel of Temperance at the end represents that part of ourselves which we discover to be essentially real after the illusions of the ego, defensiveness, and rigid habits of the past are allowed to die away. Finally, what of the last line? What can go beyond finding our true selves? To put it simply, these 7 cards depict a confrontation and finally a unity with the great forces of life itself. The other cards, formerly seen as so important, become merely the preparation for the great descent into darkness, the liberation of light, and the return of that light to the sunlit world of consciousness. To most readers, the last line will seem too vague and fanciful. We can call this subject matter religious or mythical, but these words too remain hard to grasp. The vagueness in our minds perhaps speaks more about ourselves and our time than about the subject. Any society automatically teaches its people, just by the language it uses, to make certain assumptions about the world. Examples in our culture would include the value and uniqueness of individuals, the reality and overwhelming importance of love, the necessity of freedom and social justice, and, more complex but just as strong, the basic separateness of each person. We are born alone and we die alone. Our society, built upon the materialist 18th and 19th centuries, does not merely reject the notion of superconsciousness or universal forces. We do not really know what they mean. When we deal with the last line of the major arcana then, we deal with an area uncomfortable to many of us. It will make the task of understanding these cards harder, and perhaps more rewarding. Working with these ancient pictures can bring us knowledge neglected in our education.